Since the early days of Rocket League, different playstyles have been a hot topic of conversation. From Marky Doodah's extreme ground plays, and now to the more modern OSM strategy of hitting an easy quad flip reset double touch. As time has moved on, one strategy has become a lot more in-depth, shifting away from the rock paper scissors matchups of Marky, Scrub, and Kux, and into more of a giant web of random players winning and losing. And of course, Fairy Pete. Although early success was seen by a more patient playstyle, waiting for the opponent to mess up and scoring on an open net, newer Generation 1's players have totally changed the way high-level 1's play is approached. People are going for shots that would have never been imaginable when Kuxir was at his competitive 1's peak. With this shift in mechanics, it's hard to say if the older playstyles would remain as effective against today's top players. And despite the differences across all the playstyles, there doesn't seem to be one method that's risen to the top above the rest. Everyone brings their own uniqueness to the pitch, and it works for them in different ways. So the question today is, which playstyle is generally the best for getting to Grand Champ, or just improving in ones? Here's the deal. I'm going to go into 12 ranked 1v1 matches at varying ranks, 6 in Diamond, 6 in Grand Champ, and attempt different playstyles. I'll be doing my best to emulate Scrub Killa and Kuxir's older playstyles of waiting patiently and getting goal line saves, capitalizing on my opponent's mistakes, and then I'll shift to the more modern Eekso type playstyle of forcing errors from the opponent through constant pressure and flashy mechanics. Afterwards, we'll look back and see what worked and what didn't, and what you can take away from all of this to improve your own gameplay. I started around Diamond 2 to 3ish. Immediately, what I noticed was my lack of ability to hit shots. I was whiffing constantly. I'm not sure if it was because I was just really rusty in ones, my hands were cold, or the pace of the games were something I just wasn't used to, but regardless, I missed a lot. My main takeaway from these ranks was how effective the slower playstyle was. Many players seemed unable to do a lot of the mechanical plays that most higher level players can, so it made getting saves really easy. Their shots were either extremely apparent or just not threatening in the slightest. Even if they did pull something off, many players were way too eager to go all out when shooting, not thinking of how their car would be positioned afterwards. They'd often miss the shot, and because of how hard they committed when taking it, they'd be totally out of the play, leaving me with an open net. So while I wasn't getting as many opportunities to score, I was scoring almost every opportunity I was given. When playing extremely aggressive, I found myself in a similar position to those eager attackers. I was getting more opportunities to score, but I found it much harder to consistently capitalize on those opportunities. As I said, I was missing a ton, so I'd often get it clear and then miss the shot. This type of playstyle requires an extremely high degree of mechanical confidence and consistency. Furthermore, if the opponent applied any kind of pressure, it could easily dismantle my attack. And after getting challenged, if I remained aggressive, it was pretty obvious what I was about to do. Essentially, I was committing to a decision before actually reading the play. Which leads to my next point. I was super obvious when I was just rushing the ball. Once you do something enough, no matter what rank you are, your opponent is going to pick up on it. So if you're just constantly turning and balls to the wall challenging, your opponent is just going to pop the ball a little and score in your open net every time. However, when playing slower, it was less obvious what I was doing, as I was playing much more reactionary to the play. I'd wait for my opponent to do something and then make my decision on what to do next, rather than just hoping whatever decision I made 10 seconds ago was going to work. Overall, I ended up going 5-1. 3 wins patient, but with much more saves, 2 wins aggressive with significantly less saves. I also find it interesting that I had almost the exact same amount of goals, but nearly double the amount of shots. That says to me that the extra shots you get from playing aggressive aren't really worth it. Next, the Grand Champ games. Surprisingly, I went 5-1 again, winning all 3 of the patient games and losing just 1 of the aggressive ones, exactly the same as before. I think it should be noted that since I'm fresh off my placement games, these players weren't quite GC, so I do think I would have lost more matches if I was back to my normal rank. I was still playing against low Grand Champs and high Champ 3s, the difficulty just didn't feel too high personally. And honestly, these matches were a similar story to the ranks before. I won handily when playing the slower matches. I was reactionary and calculated in my decisions. However, at the higher ranks of ones, the opponents are much better at shooting. At these ranks, if you play especially passive, your opponent will usually pick up on that. They'll start going for boost and putting you in tough situations much more than the lower ranked players ever could. Their shots are also significantly more threatening, meaning you really have to be on your game with your defensive abilities. In the aggressive matches, again, opponents pick up on the turnaround and rush strategy really easily. However, when done correctly, rushing the ball when the opponent doesn't expect it is super useful for high level ones. If they're dribbling down the field and expecting you to defend, then you randomly come out of nowhere to challenge the ball, it can catch them completely off guard. So it's especially important to be able to vary the way you approach challenging so your opponent is constantly guessing. In these games, you'll see I go for fake challenges constantly. This makes it so my opponent is never actually sure if I'm going to rush the ball or not, and if done correctly, can lead to a goal when you finally do rush. So the stats ended in a similar place as the ranks before. Again, I was playing against slightly lower ranked people, so that definitely affects the stats, but the lessons still apply. Regardless of the aggressive or passive playstyle, I want to emphasize the importance of the speed required in your decision making. The ability to assess the situation, make a decision, and act quickly is key to playing well in ones. Now, there are some misconceptions around playing quickly. People preach the need for speed all the time, but many confuse speed as trying to force yourself to move quickly and play at a pace you aren't comfortable at, when in reality it's the speed you make your decisions and the lack of hesitation you have when executing your decisions. You have to be confident in your challenges, and you can't hesitate when you try to do them. So, in summary, for the lower ranks, I'd totally recommend you just focus on not overcommitting. Just make sure you're staying grounded, shadowing properly, and making your saves. From there, you'll be given more than enough opportunities to score. You just have to make sure you're capitalizing on the chances you're given. Once you get higher in the ranks, however, I think you need to start changing things up. If you can, acting really fast on offense, getting those crazy plays can be really good for scoring, as your opponent never actually knows what you're going for. But on defense, I find it's generally best to take it passive. Wait for your opponents to save, close the distance, and challenge when you can. There's plenty of tutorials on how to defend in Shadow, but if enough people are interested, I'd be happy to make my own video explaining my approach to defense. So to answer the question, which playstyle is best for ones? There isn't one. Everybody has their own mix between aggressive and passive, and it's just about finding what works for you. So above all else, I want to preach balance in your playstyle. Take a few games utilizing these demonstrated playstyles and find what works for you and what doesn't. Then take the best of both and implement it into your own games. It's not like there's any kind of rule for how you have to play ones. All the pros play slightly differently, and it works for them in different ways. Find what you like and find what you don't like, and just experiment. As long as you're trying to change up what you're doing and you're trying to improve, odds are you will. You just have to stay committed and consistent with your practice. Now go forth and rush the ball like an idiot. Quick note, I recorded and almost finished this video like 9 months ago. I had a whole 1v1 series planned, and honestly I'd love to keep working on it. The series would cover more of the mental and psychological approach to ones, and I think it would be pretty interesting for a lot of people. Obviously there's tons of content out there already for ones, so I don't know if there's a market for it or not, so feel free to let me know if you'd be interested in those types of videos. Or separate from ones, if you want to see a video about 3's gameplay, let me know. Again, I don't really know what's been covered and what hasn't in those specific areas, but I'd love to make that kind of content if I could. So if you guys want more of these game strategy tutorial type videos, let me know. Also subscribe and join the Discord. Bye bye.